Welcome back to another episode of Cold Red. I'm Ray Carr, and with me always is James R. Fitzgerald, also known as Fitz. Fitz, how are you?
I am great. And without further ado, I'm going to tell everyone we have a crossover episode tonight with best case, worst case. And I'm going to turn it right over to Jim Clementi to say hi to his folks.
How you doing, everybody? It's good to see you, James and Ray, or Fitz. We'll call you Fitz because that's how we distinguish the Jims here. But Jim Clementi, retired FBI profiler and former New York City prosecutor, and co-host of the podcast Best Case, Worst Case, and the podcast Real Crime Profile. And we're going to be doing a very special crossover episode with Fitz and Ray because we want to talk about a case that has been, well, in the news, and it's very confounding, I would say. We've heard a lot of things, and some of them are contradictory and so forth. So it's great to talk to other experts about this very, very sad and important case.
And you're not talking about the reflecting pond in Washington, D.C., I don't think.
I'm not talking about that. No.
We are going to start with talking about Nancy Guthrie on today's episode. Episodes plural, I suppose we could say. And then about halfway through, we're going to switch over to a case where Ray and I have spent a lot of time this season and last, and that is the case of the homicide of Lindsay Buziak from 2008 in British Columbia, Canada. And here it turns out that Jim Clemente played a role of some sort in about 2020, and we'll go over some of the interaction he had with Mr. Buziak as well as perhaps the Saanich PD. But we'll get more into that as we go along. So I'm looking forward to this sort of bifurcated episode with two very important cases. One about 5 months old, the other one over 18 years old. But we're going to try to do our best to maybe resolve them. And quite frankly, Jim, this is like the old days in Quantico. You and I, of course, were assigned there as profilers full time, and Ray would have brought a case to us from somewhere in the Philly division. And, we'd be prepping in advance, of course. Ray comes in with detectives, state police, whomever, or other agents, and we all meet up and we do a consultation. So it's only the three of us today, but in a way, it'll sort of mirror those days way back when we were both in the unit together.
Yeah.
And I should say too, I miss both Maureen and Kathy tonight. Yeah, I know they're your regular co-hosts.
They both have sent their regrets, but they were both involved in other family issues today that they couldn't tear themselves away from. But they wanted us to keep going and talk about this case because it has been churning in the news recently.
Ray, why don't you throw out some observations, questions, however you want to do it.
Well, let's just start from this perspective. From a behavioral investigative perspective, there are several aspects to this case, especially the content of the ransom notes that stand out. And I know they stand out to all of us. Assuming the notes are authentic and connected to Nancy's disappearance. And that seems to be the big elephant in the room here, because no one's really said, other than TMZ, who believes that everything is authentic, but there's a lot of really important indicators about offender motivation, sophistication control, and the psychological state. Like, for instance, the initial ransom note, it demands $4 million in Bitcoin. And it claimed that Nancy was safe but scared. Now, we know that not to be really true, because less than 7 days later, they get another note that says she's buried in the woods, as most people would say, but they say she's buried in nature. What's your take on someone that comes up with that kind of cliche, poetic euphemism, as you might call it?
Let me just start with that and say,
Sure.
I don't like the word notes. I like the word communications. And I know we did this before, not correcting anyone here. We don't know exactly how they came in, maybe emails, maybe postings of some sort. So I learned long ago, working forensic linguistic cases, just call them communications. That could be spoken language,
Words
written.
matter.
Words do matter, spoken or written, Jim, and how they are transmitted matters. So, the Ramsey case had a note, and we knew that never was a kidnapping. That whole note thing was bogus, but that was a literal note or letter, call it what you will. The Lindbergh kidnapping had notes. There were other ones. The very few for ransom kidnappings that ever occurred in the U.S., there were usually notes of some sort. Here, it's all cyber communications, though, and I just want to make sure we're clear there. And in terms of, was this truly a kidnapping for profit, or were these opportunists who just, from whatever country base they're in or part of the U.S., they said, "Hey, we have this cyber account already set up. Let's try to get some money out of this whole Guthrie thing." Jim, why don't you take it from there and just throw in your observations?
Well, Ray, I would like to ask you why you said that, because we know that's false, because a week later there was a follow-up note that said she was dead. Why is it? Do you think that she was not alive on that first day?
I would like to think that she was alive, but all indications, and to be very honest, I always hold out hope because there's no evidence that says that she is deceased. There isn't
Right,
anything out there.
yeah, but there was evidence at the scene that she was alive, and that was aspirated blood that she coughed up
Correct.
right outside the house. So she was definitely alive at the time that she was abducted. And I mean, although she was on medications and she probably couldn't survive long without them, or it could have seriously increased the risk of her death not having them. I don't know of any evidence that she was deceased immediately, but I do know that from what I know of these notes, these two notes that Savannah Guthrie has said that she believes were real and truthful, was that the first one was received days after the abduction, and they were sent to media outlets, and that is, as far as I know, a real anomaly in an abduction case, in a kidnapping case, because generally kidnappers want to avoid law enforcement involvement. And of course, if you give it to the media, it's immediately going to be known to law enforcement. So that is a counterproductive move. But it may tell us more about what, if they're legitimate, what this offender actually wanted. And I believe that was attention. They sent the communications to the media because they wanted the media's attention, the world's attention, and perhaps Savannah Guthrie's attention. And that, to me, could mean that this is somebody who was fixated on her or had some revenge motive for her. And this was the way they got her attention. This is actually what they got. They got no money. They got her to go on media, and public media and news media, and actually talk to them. So that may be what their main goal was out of all this.
I have to kind of agree with you there. I don't think money was ever really in the play here. I think it was more for attention. It was more for exactly what you're saying, Jim. I really agree with that.
Ray, our first media hit on this case, I think we did together
Hmm.
on News Nation, I believe. And the first thing I remember saying, and I forget who they came to first, and this was like this is like Monday night, I think, afterwards. And I said, all I know, all I'm going to offer here so far is that this is either a kidnapping for profit or an abduction for some other reason. And kidnapping for
Right.
profits are very rare. I've already been through that. And the abduction, what? And I was asked, whoever, I think Elizabeth Vargas, well, what would they be doing that for? I said, some kind of revenge, some type of need-driven behavior. And this is some reason of getting back to the family, getting back to Savannah in a way that, of course, is almost the worst way possible. They couldn't get to Savannah themselves. I'm using they. It doesn't mean I necessarily think it's more than one person. It's rare for these types of people to operate in teams, they do happen occasionally when you have this sort of need-driven behavior situation, and this perhaps these psychological issues that are compelling you to make this master plan that probably went on for months in advance. So but there's definitely an alpha male who's in charge here, whether they have an assistant or not. Hopefully someday we'll find that out. And but this is something about where Savannah didn't do the right thing, and this is his way of getting back at her. Couldn't get to her, couldn't get to her kids. He sees her mother on TV all the time, knows where she lives, had access to it, no doubt surveilled it, pre-offense behavior, days, weeks, months before, and when it all came down to it, the abduction itself was successful. What happened afterwards, whatever their plan was, her dying, if there ever was an attempt for money, which I agree with, I think everyone here, there wasn't. It takes away from that. So who knows if they wanted her to die right away, if they killed her right away. Obviously, she was bleeding for a reason. Punch in the mouth, in the nose, bloody nose, whatever, and that only exacerbated, most likely at this point, her death, days or even hours after that. So I think it sounds like we're in agreement. This is an abduction more than a kidnapping. The exact motive, we don't know yet, but it seems like it's personal to this offender.
Yeah, I agree with that, Jim. And I think that we have very little direct knowledge of what's in those notes and or communications and what other evidence was found at the scene. I mean, it's difficult being sort of in so much in the dark. We're used to being right in the mix and knowing all the information. Ray, you said something that I didn't know that you just said about um, the being. Did you say buried in nature? Is that how
Buried
it
in
was?
nature. Yeah.
And where's that quote from? What's the
That
source
was
of that?
from the note that the Bureau made public that came in about 6 days to 7 days after she was abducted, that we never knew about her. It was always there. We just never knew the content, and they released the content.
When did they release that content?
About 2
Back
weeks
when
ago.
this 2 weeks ago, back when this came back in the news.
Yeah,
That's why I want to throw this out to you guys. There's this new communication that came into TMZ where there's messages in there, and it says, "Hey, look, I have a video of Nancy
Right.
with the main guy
Right.
the day she allegedly died, and I can identify some information about the suspect. And really, I have evidence that there's more than one offender involved. And all I want is one Bitcoin, which is about $62,000."
It
And I'm
makes
thinking,
absolutely no sense. I think
no,
that just totally undermines the actual that it undermines any credibility of that note, because why, if you had that information, would you not take the $1 million that's been offered by the family as opposed to $62,000? It makes absolutely no sense. I don't put any credibility on that. But you're saying that when it leaked, that the FBI has determined that the two notes that Savannah Guthrie said were legitimate, that they are not legitimate. You're saying at that point that the FBI actually released one of the notes?
I I don't think they released the whole note, Jim. And what I'm getting is basically what's out there in the media is the fact that they released information that was in one of the notes,
some
Jim.
quotes, some
Some
quotes.
quotes that
And
were in
actually, it
there.
was buried with nature, was the quote.
Buried with nature.
Yes, which is
Buried
an
in nature,
odd
buried with.
phraseology because, as I said, I guess last week and on other podcasts, when you think about it, we're all buried with nature at some point. We can be thrown in a pond or a lake. That's nature. We can be chopped up and put in holes. Animals eating us. That's buried with nature. So that person saying that it has no meaning. It has
Yeah, but
maybe a graphic
buried
meaning, but
buried
it doesn't necessarily
with
mean anything.
nature.
That
That
that conjunction is even. I'm
it's
sorry, preposition is interesting. Yeah,
yeah, it's not with is a very
it
unusual.
is.
I mean, not certainly not a typical English usage of the term.
I would, but see, it's out of context, and that's what, as a linguist, it's very frustrating to only have a quote, and you're hoping. And Jim, remember I brought this up a couple of weeks ago, the DC sniper case. Remember the tarot card? We
Sure.
had it. We did an analysis of it, and we know it said "Call me God" on the front of the card,
Mm-hmm.
but it
Mhm.
somehow leaked and went out, "I am God."
Right.
And it sounds nuanced, but they are completely different meanings.
Right. Well, that's why I asked what the source of this was. The FBI. Are you saying the FBI actually released portions of the note?
That's
Because
what's
I
being
didn't
claimed.
see
That's
any.
what's being claimed
All right, but claimed by who?
by the media. That's
Yeah, but
what.
then if they actually
Correct.
released it, we would have seen that. We would have been able to. Now, they may be saying that somebody in the FBI told them, their sources, their confidential
Correct.
sources, but just like the determination that was leaked in Reuters that the FBI believes those communications to be false and not related to the case, that was just a leak. That's not confirmed by the FBI. And I don't believe it. I don't believe that they have made such a determination without notifying the family. I mean, why would Samantha get on national news and say that I believe these two communications are true, and then the FBI doesn't step in and say, well, "Wait a minute, we don't agree with that." It just doesn't make sense to me that the victim's family would not know before somebody leaked out this information.
All right, but and I said all along, this is so difficult dealing with leaks that are, and Jim, and you and and I had people never comment on this. If we were working next to someone at the FBI who was leaking, I'm not sure I would call his supervisor, but I would probably grab the phone and wrap it around his neck. I
Right,
don't like
confront
leakers.
him.
I
Right,
don't like
Yeah.
leakers. I would say you don't do this shit. This is the
right,
FBI. You don't do. And I know when the media talks about them and they're like good guys or good agents whatever. To me, they're bad guys. I don't care if it's even an innocent leak. You don't do that. And of course, many of the times they don't even have the real information and they
right.
get it wrong, like the DC sniper case we talked about. So I think this though was I forget his name, Harvey from TMZ.
Yeah,
He's the one finally reading some of the letters that some of the communications that TMZ received way back in February, and he's
right,
the one reading from a script in front of him saying "buried with nature," and the next comment was "she's not with us anymore" was not intentional. So all that I was asked to do, and Ray and I think others out
Hmm.
there comment on what Harvey was it Levine, whatever from TMZ, what he was saying, and all right, well he's saying he received this communication from someone and turned it over to the FBI, and now months later he's releasing this. All right, we'll just work off of that. But I said all along, we don't know its value, its meaning. We'll give you some
right,
comments. It's odd, but without more context, it's virtually meaningless to us, and this whole investigation. And I'll leave it with this for now, Jim. Like with Unabomb, publish these friggin' letters. Let's see if someone identifies spellings, writing style, whatever it is, and maybe they're fake. We can identify the fake people. If they happen to be real from the actual kidnapper, well, that's even better. And let's get these things out there.
right. But Jim Fitz, uh, wouldn't you say that those two statements, buried with nature, and what was the other one you said?
Her death was
That she's no longer
unintentional.
with us.
Was
Right.
not intentional.
It was not
Right, but
intentional.
but
Was not Her death was
she
not
is no
intentional.
longer with us, and that was not intentional.
Basically, yeah.
I, I mean, you're a master forensic linguistic profiler. Does that tell you anything about the gender of the writer of that note?
Yeah, and I'm always careful with that, Jim. And you and I did the Ramsey note together. I was careful with that too.
Hmm.
I said it's very motherly, if you remember me saying
Yes, I
on
do.
the TV show. But I didn't say necessarily male or female. And with basically these 10 words, I'm just not equipped, or certainly don't have. I just wouldn't want to go out on the limb and say gender with these particular words. I know you're saying they're kind of soft and caring and maybe borderline empathetic or
Right.
sympathetic to some degree. And could that lead to a female author of this particular communication? I wouldn't rule that out, but as a forensic linguist, I'd be, highly criticized if I said, these 10 words means it's a woman
Sure.
author.
Right. I get that. But what I'm saying is it's extremely atypical, right? You've seen many, many, many actual kidnapping notes, ransom notes,
Not
right?
really. There aren't that
Well,
many out there, Jim.
yeah, but well, how many did you have in CTAD?
Actual for-profit kidnappings, Lindbergh, Frank Sinatra Jr., the Exxon executive in '92. Remember the other Harvey Weinstein, the tuxedo guy in New York City in '93. That's basically it. Now there's custodial letters, there's things like that, and human trafficking, but they wouldn't be writing letters or communications back and forth. But no, I mean the best we can go on is Bruno Hoffman. He had like 13 letters he wrote, to the Lindbergh family. So that's the problem with this case. And I'm the first one to admit it. No one is an expert on an actual for-profit kidnappings, at least in the U.S. They happen in Central America, South America, and other parts of the world all the time, but
Yeah, there's a
not
lot
here.
of
And yeah, and
drug
so
related. Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, athletes that make money here, their families get kidnapped and extorted over there, whatever. So there is so little of this. That's why the Ramsey case, when we first got that letter, you and I were sitting in the room together saying, "Tim, this is BS."
This is
And we don't have to get into
ridiculous.
we don't have to get into what actually we think happened, but just the letter itself. There's no reason that this letter would be left behind. Although, as I've said, if this was a real kidnapping, I'm back to Nancy Guthrie. If the people were smart, they would have left a communication of some sort there. They
At
could
the
have written
scene.
on a napkin, on a leaf, anything like that to protect themselves with gloves, with a pen that couldn't be identified or whatever, but they didn't. And that's what why would you kidnap someone for profit and make the investigators number one, the family number two, you can reverse the order maybe, but why would you make them guess whether you're real or not? Have proof of life from the very beginning. A note inside the door would certainly be proof you're the kidnapper. And then a day or two later, a piece of her cloth, a piece of her hair, hopefully nothing more drastic than that. And, an old fashioned Polaroid snapshot, whatever, that she's still holding up a newspaper, that she's still alive. Why make this guessing game and make it almost like a Dungeons and Dragons scenario? Oh, well, we think we saw a Fitbit on the floor, of her bedroom when her bedroom's been on TV, her giving tours of it. So there are just so many arguments against this being an actual kidnapping and these communications being legit that I really
Well,
didn't put a whole lot of time into it with the people saying, publish the whole thing. Let me see it. Let everyone else see it. And I hope the Bureau has an experienced forensic linguist looking at these. And I've said that a few times
let's hope
on the
so.
air.
Yeah. But Jim, it's interesting though that and I know you're making the distinction, and hopefully our listeners understand the difference between an abduction. This is clearly an abduction. This is not something like where somebody feigns an abduction, but the victim is still in the house, for example. This is an actual abduction. But what makes it a kidnapping is if somebody is demanding a ransom. And that's the distinguishing factor. And here, the ransom demand did not come immediately. It did not go to the family. It was not left at the site of the abduction, and it was sent to the media. And all those things distinguish this case from the ones that were actually real. And so in our minds, it doesn't appear to be an actual kidnapping for ransom with a profit motive. And so, and as we have discussed before, there are other motives that could be potentially possible, and one is revenge, one is some kind of fixation on Samantha or Nancy, and um, uh, another is some kind of personal cause that is just not obvious to anybody outside of that circle. So there are a number of things it could be. And all of those things would be knowing which one of those things it was would be very helpful in terms of resolving this case. So, like you said, if they publish these letters, and I don't know why it's important that they keep them private. If they're trying to actually use the public, I don't see any reason why they can't publish the entire letters unless there's some kind of really horrific details in there that they'd want to protect, the family's privacy about.
Ray, I'm going to turn it over to you, but just the 6-month anniversary is coming up. It will be nice on August 1st, the 6-month, an awful anniversary of the day Nancy was abducted. And it'd be nice if maybe they'd put this package together. And as we all know here, you can leave certain statements out or signatures or something at the very bottom that only the law enforcement and the author knows. So that way, any copycats that come in or attempt to come in, you would know those differences. But Ray, do you want to kind of wind this part down? Are there any other questions or observations?
You hit on something that I want to mention, but I think that the abduction itself I thought was somewhat organized, but I think the communications, if they were sent by the same individuals, were very disorganized. And you said something too, Jim, that led me to believe, we're talking about all these older abductions and kidnappings and the notes that are for ransom, and that's the way things used to be done. But with the outset of these video games and these other things, sometimes I wonder if this was kind of set up by the offender or offenders as somewhat of a game. How much can we get away with here to do this? I didn't notice a whole lot of sophistication and I don't know if you guys did either with the individual that had went up to the blink camera or the ring camera.
Mhm.
I didn't see a whole lot of sophistication with that individual.
No.
It's just go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I think you're right in terms of organization, uh, in terms of planning. I think there was a lot of planning done, but this person was not an experienced abductor. This person
No.
clearly showed his inexperience and his lack of real forensic and criminal sophistication, especially given the fact that there's a camera there and he reaches for weeds and tries to cover it up. And in the process, I really believe he exposes what looks like a tattoo on his right wrist, I believe it was.
Hmm.
And all of those things are damning in terms of his actual abilities to pull this off. But why hasn't he been caught yet? What is it about this case that makes it so difficult? Um, I I have to say that I think it's because the motive for this thing was very different than what they treated it like, and I also have to worry because I've seen the blood spatter evidence outside the house unprotected that they didn't do a good job forensically in the house, and there I I think it's almost a guarantee that this offender left his DNA in that house in multiple ways. Hairs from his face, his eyelashes, his mustache. He's breathing out through this mask. He's not wearing a surgical mask that would have caught most of that DNA, but he's breathing it into the house up to 42 minutes long. He left his DNA in that house, and a good forensic analysis and search should have found that. So I just I just hope that there is a sample that was collected or multiple samples that were collected that will lead to this guy in forensic genetic genealogy or some other way.
Yeah, we're not going to bash these guys, but I'm going to tell you that I believe that the delay in bringing the bureau in really, really affected how this case went. And when you even look at the fact of the forensics and the tainting of the evidence as it was stomped on and gone through by multiple people, closed, reopened, I think that's a lot of problems. What concerns me the most is that when this individual is caught, is that any evidence that is there, is it going to be able to be applied to the individuals that were arrested for this horrendous crime?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think the person may have learned too from the Oregon killer. Leave all electronic communication devices
Yeah.
behind, or in a lead envelope or something, and because they seem to have no luck doing that kind of triangulation on cell lines, cell towers, whatever. So yeah, so this person had a bit as sloppy, and I agree. This looked like a Keystone, not cop, a Keystone kidnapper on the front porch. But he at least seemingly had common sense enough to not have a cell phone with him or any other kind of a tracking device in that regard. I think even modern cars they all have computers in them. They can be tracked for speed limits and things like that. So I'm not sure if he somehow disabled that or had a car, older than 1980, which would stick out like a sore thumb. So I'm just, I think this guy is more lucky than anything else. And let's just hope someday that this matter can be resolved. But I think the investigators got to now be proactive and put some stuff out there for the public to see. They can still protect their case, and they can still protect the evidence involved therein. But written communication has solved cases before. If you're listening, Pena County Sheriff's Department, and considering to release those documents could make a big difference in this particular case.
Let me throw this one question before we jump into our next topic area here. I'm going to throw it to both of you guys, Fitz and Jimmy. Do you believe the ransom letters were written by a single individual or a proxy acting on behalf of some sort of syndicate?
Jim, go ahead.
I'll jump in first, and I'll just say I think the second option is absurd. I don't believe that I don't. That's as absurd as the quote ransom letter in the Ramsey case.
And we know how bogus that whole thing was.
We do.
Yeah, I don't. And again, we're on the outside here, folks, and there could be one document we don't know anything about that could, lay everything out in, dotted line A, B, C, D, detail. But from everything that we've heard so far, and without the proof of life, now even proof of death, I would just need a lot more information to believe any of these communications is legitimate. And I'll just add on to there, it doesn't mean the FBI and the Sheriff's Department shouldn't investigate these and try to get to the source of them. But however, with the minimal amount of proof or indications that these letters apparently revealed about the abduction itself, about Nancy Guthrie, living or dead afterwards, any half-assed kidnapper knows you got to provide that proof of life. And if that wasn't given, and it was just some half-assed thing that we think we saw something on the corner of the floor, to me that's not enough. If you want the money, you're going to make it really clear you've got this person. Here's proof. Send the money now, or she dies. And I'm sure the Guthries would have. Savannah and her family would have done that. Why send it to TMZ and a local Tucson TV station? They want attention, like Jim said, and they wanted Savannah to know maybe this person's using the media against her, just like she wouldn't allow him, to be part of the media that he wanted, an interview or something like that with her. And Jim,
or it could have been some fixation that she knew nothing about. It was completely in his mind.
And I said, and I'm willing to leave it at this. I'm hoping they go back at least 5 years with every single email and or letter Savannah Guthrie ever received, and look at every single one of those authors, and even the most innocent. Hey, really like your show this morning. That was great. Okay, who sent that? And take it from there and see what that person's up to right now, or certainly what they were up to February 1st.
Let's hope they're doing that, Jim. Let's hope they're doing it.
The answer may be right there. So yeah, why don't we switch gears here and segue into a case a little bit older?
Okay, can I do an extra for?
Yeah, go ahead, Jimmy.
Go ahead.
Well, thank you everybody for listening to this very special crossover with Cold Red Podcast. And we appreciate you listening to Best Case, Worst Case, and Real Crime Profile signing off. All right, and then I'll do it again at the other one. Thank you.
Don't
Got
leave,
it.
folks. We're still
No,
here.
we're not leaving. We're continuing. Yeah.
That's just for Jim's pod, and we'll just do this in one piece as we tend to do. Go ahead, Ray. Walk us through into.
We want to turn our focus to a homicide that happened back in 2008 in Victoria, British Columbia. Jim and I have been playing with this for our last 2 seasons. Last season, we did 4 episodes. We spoke with the father, and we did another 4 episodes this season. And in doing some of those episodes, there's been a lot of individuals that have come forward and have been willing to speak to us, and both on the record and off the record. But Jim, you bring a unique insider perspective that you have that we weren't even involved yet. This wasn't even on our radar, and you happen to be contacted by a friend of Jeff Buziak,
Right.
and he asked if you would take a look at this case. But in doing so, he said, "Listen, the Saanich PD doesn't want any outside help, doesn't want anything." And you kind of said to him, "Well, what the heck do you expect me to do if they don't want to talk to anybody or not look for any help?" And I think you did, and you can go from there. I think you did
Yeah.
talk to somebody in Saanich, Jim.
Yeah, I did. So yeah, actually, I got contacted indirectly by Mr. Buziak, and then I believe I had some direct email contact with him, and it's kind of how it went. What you just said. Basically, what happened was he said that he would like me to get involved, and I said, well, I would need the case file. I would need the cooperation of local law enforcement. I can't do an analysis or give you a profile just based on the facts that you can tell me. I need to know what was actually determined. And he said, well, nobody there really wants any outside help. So I did reach out to the detective in the Saanich PD, and I did have conversations with him, and then I called the father back, and I said, or I emailed him back, I'm not sure, but I said, look, this is going to be a one-way street. If you have information you want to get to them and make sure they deal with, then I'll be your intermediary. I will talk to them. They're talking to me, but I will not be sharing information back. And that's just how it is in an investigation. You don't do anything that could potentially derail the investigation just simply to pass information back and forth. So I did that. I provided the detective with the information the father wanted me to, and I offered my services to help in any way. We did have a few conversations, and un- that's basically as far as it ever went with me. I do think that they were actually um, still investigating the case. I don't think it was a case that they said it's cold and we're not doing anything about it. However, I do think that the the leads and the investigative avenues that were open to them at the time were very limited.
Yeah, and we've had Mr. Buziak on with us 4 different episodes, right, Ray? Back in
Yes,
January, and
he
he's
was. Yes.
a grieving father, and we certainly
I totally
sympathize
understand that.
with that. I mean, uh, to lose any child difficult and brutally murdered in the prime of their life, and the case remains unsolved. And I think you may know to this point, Jim, or maybe you don't. It's the only homicide ever investigated by Saanich PD. There wasn't one before or after, and it remains unsolved. And you think, well, they only had one. You think they could solve it, but it could also mean they just don't have that experience level or that competence level. And it's not, denigrating them on an individual basis. It's just not, what they're best at. But
But also, Jim, to be honest, or Fitz, to be honest, most homicides that are solved, there is some connection, known connection between the victim and the offender.
Of course.
And this could be the fact that it's unsolved could indicate that it was an outside um, party that was not at all, or parties that were not at all connected to this victim. So that would make it much more difficult, especially for local law enforcement, if the person or persons that were involved in this murder came from out of state or out of country.
Oh, there's no question it's more difficult, but then they can rule out that inner circle, which unfortunately, from what we're hearing, they can't completely do that.
Hmm.
And where is the interconnectivity? And I'm not sure.
Well,
And I
tell me
want to
what
be
you've summarized for me, what you found in
well.
your
I
looking at
am
it.
going to do that very quickly here. And I never actually apologized to Mr. Buziak, but I did have to remind him about the concept of victimology. And Jim, you know that very well, as
Sure.
does Ray, and I think most of our audience does now. It's understanding, if the victim of a crime, what about him or her perhaps made that person a victim of a crime, or allowed an offender of some sort for some reason to better have access to this person and carry out the violent crime. Um, it seems like Lindsay was a great person and had many friends and was outgoing, nice, but she was hanging out with a crowd of people involved in some heavy drug activity.
Right.
And I'm not saying she did anything illegal at all. And I don't think Mr. Buziak even really disputed this. He just didn't like us making it look like she was more, adjacent to this than she was, but she was. And even though she was a real estate agent and she thought this was a regular deal and would have been a nice commission she earned with this $1 million sale back in 2008, people she was dealing with or associating with, they were involved in heavy drug trafficking in the whole Victoria area. There's rumors of Hell's Angels involved, outlaw motorcycle gang and cartels involved. And it was unfortunate. And perhaps she didn't even know this at first. And Jim, what we've kind of come to believe here, she heard something or she saw something, and she may have told a girlfriend.
Hmm.
That girlfriend told someone. They said, "Whoa, Lindsay has to be eliminated." That that's the best way, I think, Ray, and I think you kind of agree with that. That's most likely what happened here. So you're right. It's not like her boyfriend or her ex-husband, whatever like that. But what do they know? How much do they know? Ex-boyfriend in this case that she was apparently looking to break up with. But then these tentacles from her victimology, Jim, is what no doubt ultimately led to her demise.
Right. So she, as I recall now, would have been somebody that we would have said was sort of a medium risk individual. In other words, a low risk individual in general, but engaging in an activity that raised that risk level for her. And also, I do believe that the way that the appointment was set up and the parameters of that appointment indicate a very well, they wanted to be certain that she was going to agree to do this at that date and time and place. So that to me is something that's very organized and
Mhm.
maybe even would be considered professional. In other words, it wasn't just like somebody rolling up at a showing that she happened to be at or at an open house where other people could be. They wanted an exclusive showing, and it was going to be for a very expensive place where she would get a very high uh, commission. And so she would definitely want this. And that to me, you know, says that whoever decided to use that method to get access to her knew what they were doing.
I agree. I agree with that assessment. Here's my one issue with what we're talking about when we say this is professional. And the reason why I kind of back off of that a little bit is because the way the homicide was committed. She was stabbed, and I don't know the exact number of times, but I believe it's somewhere between 30 and 40 times with stab wounds initially in the back of the neck, the back, and then slash marks all throughout the front, throughout her breast, which were augmented. She had breast implants about 6 months earlier. I just professionally, that's not a professional hit to me. That's more something personal, rage, anger. For someone to do that much to someone, uh, it seems personal. Now, not that, and we always say when we look at homicides, we always look at the inner circle first, and then we try and eliminate. But usually, even if we can eliminate because of something in the inner circle, the person closest to the victim, it doesn't necessarily mean that that person closest to the victim didn't use somebody outside of the parameters to protect himself, as you said, Jim, to bring someone in to do that for them. And that way give an area of separation so that there's no way they can prove that I was ever connected to
Right, because there's room to build an alibi and so forth.
Correct.
And I agree with what you're saying about the rage and the personal nature of that, but it could also be interpreted as a message. And
Exactly.
we all have heard about the horror stories of cartel hits and how horrible the things that they'll do, and then maybe hang the bodies of the people that they killed from a bridge so that everybody sees that. But maybe they were instructed to make it as gory as possible so that, for example, let's say that the victim was actually intending to talk or said that they might talk to law enforcement about what they heard or observed, or just the fact that they told their friend what they heard or observed, and there was a message that they wanted to send, that you don't do this kind of stuff, because if you do, this kind of horrible thing will happen to you. I mean, I don't think that 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 real estate agents are extremely low risk when they're at a showing in an empty house and so forth. I think that is a slightly elevated risk to begin with. So add on top of that the risk of these kind of nefarious people and drug dealings. Um, I do believe that it wasn't just her professional work that put her in this very unfortunate unfortunately fatal situation.
Absolutely, Jim. I think you're right. There was a message, and they wanted to get a message out, and they did, because everybody in that community, or that's tied or knew Lindsay or was close to Lindsay, other than her immediate family, are scared to death to come forward or to talk to the police
Hmm.
because of something that might happen to them. So I think you're on to something there. Jim and I have kind of teetered with that as well. But yeah, that was a message. Hey, if you talk, this is what will happen.
Yeah.
And Jim, I'm not sure if you were aware of this when you had your early interaction in 2020 or so. But about 6 months before Lindsay was murdered, um, someone in her crowd, a guy named Kyle McDonald, about her age, and hung out with the guys, and I believe some interaction with some of the bad guys. We'll just leave it at that. Uh, he up and disappears, never to be seen again.
Yeah,
Mhm.
And did Lindsay see something or hear something about what happened to Kyle? And is that what these people were afraid of? Uh, and what I've posited, I did back in January, and I will say it a few weeks ago and say it again here. If missing person cases are tough to work, but if the police could refocus themselves on the missing case of Kyle McDonald, uh, and they make some headway on that, I have a feeling they'd be in the same ballpark as the people
I
who
agree.
killed
Mm.
of Lindsay.
Yeah,
I
because
don't believe in coincidences. They're in the same little town, the same
that has
PD.
never had a murder before.
Yeah.
Correct.
Now a guy goes
Correct.
missing and one is murdered 6 months later. Coincidence? Probably not.
Yeah, but that kind of, I didn't know that information I may have when I was more familiar with the facts of the case, but that tells me. I mean, my initial reaction to that is, well, the disappearance of Kyle did not have the desired effect because this other information got out, and Lindsay needed to be a better example. In other words, just making the guy disappear didn't accomplish their goals.
Well, unless the goal was just to make him disappear, and she somehow found out about that.
Yeah, all I'm saying is that, yeah, I'm just adding another possibility in that why the reason why this one needed to be done in such a, grotesque and violent manner was because when they just made somebody disappear, it didn't have the desired effect. And now they
And
have that desired effect. Everybody is scared to death.
yeah, disappearing, he could be living up on with Kodiak bears somewhere in the Yukon, but the fact that someone 6 months later is brutally stabbed, especially a young woman, the way she was, that sent a message, as we said
Mhm.
earlier. And as I posited back in January, and I'll say it again, if they could somehow, the law enforcement could somehow solve the case of Kyle McDonald, I think they'd have a good chance of solving the murder of Lindsay Buziak. But we're not there yet, and we'll say it again publicly, Jim. You're an adjacent. You've been to the VDoc Society. You know how we work there. Ray
Mhm.
and I are full members, and we offer our services publicly here again. We will fly you in, no cost of you, put you up. You have the best experts in the land. Jim, we could bring you in as a special expert on that case, but they apparently turned it down before. And I'm not sure what your final words with the Saanich PD, Jim. 6 or so years ago, did they finally say, "Don't call us, we'll call you," or how did that end?
Well, I think in general it was thank you for your assistance, and we'll get back to you if we need anything else.
Did they get back to you, Jim?
Not that
Mm,
I know of.
You're still waiting,
okay.
right?
Yeah, waiting for that call.
Mm.
Hey, Fitz, do
Yes.
you? I'm reading something here that one of the producers sent over that said it was a recent anonymous email that was sent to the Cold Red production team by an anonymous source in the Saanich PD regarding potential involvement of something. Did you remember reading that or information to that?
An anonymous source within the Saanich PD sent something to the Cold Red
Correct.
Post. I did not see that. I'd
Okay.
remember.
I'm drawing a blank on that as well.
Mm.
We've
But
got some interesting information and some threats that have been made, and
yes.
well, we won't get into any details on that. But people are listening to this podcast, and Jim, with you on board, and you're only going to add to its the legitimate questions we're asking here and the observations we're making. And I just hope the Saanich PD is willing to. They need outside help.
Mhm.
And Jim, we've done that all the time with task
Yeah.
forces in the FBI.
Well, our
They can
whole
still run the show. They'll make the arrest. They'll put the cuffs on the people, but bring in other folks with their databases, their computer setups, their CART teams.
now that you've just reminded me that one of the things I did offer the Sanders PD was a referral to the BAU, which I did give them that information, and I did not expect that was the last communication. I did not expect them to tell me whether or not they did interact with the BAU, but I certainly gave them uh, the name and number of a contact there so that they could, if they so desired.
Hmm.
I hope they did.
I hope they did too. I think we would have heard that somewhere by now. But they could just put that out there publicly if they wanted. That would be fine. But coming up on the 20-year point, well, I mean, year and a half or so away. But I mean, it's just like with the Guthrie case coming up on 6 months, maybe coming up on 20 years, they really have to reevaluate everything they've done. We're not sure exactly how the grand jury concept works up there. We know the prosecutors' offices are slightly different than in the U.S. and how they work. But we've been calling out the Saanich PD, but there's also the solicitor, whatever they call them in the various provinces in Canada. But those prosecutors have to get on the ball too here, be willing to issue some search warrants and some other ways of gathering information about people, about this case. I think this is solvable, but the right people have to be brought in and said, you're going to be arrested for this drug deal last month unless you give us some information about this happening from so many years ago. And everyone out there, I'm not giving anything away here, they know how this works. So and as I always said, the real badasses from 20 years ago, maybe not so much now. They might have mellowed a bit, or they're in jail, and there's ways of getting to them and offering them deals that they really can't refuse.
That is one of the benefits of working cold cases, is that the threats to the people that wouldn't talk back then because they were so worried about these potential life-threatening people, those things, people move away, they're not in that circle anymore, they've straightened out their lives, whatever it is. So hopefully they're continuing pulling on those investigative threads.
Well, see, that's my concern, because the threats that are coming in are people telling people to keep their mouth shut. Now, they're not telling us who's making those threats, but that tells me that the people involved in this thing still live in the area. If they're still able to have that stronghold and, kind of send that message of fear out, I think that is what is holding this thing back. And I think that's why, and Jim and I have said this, or Fitz and I have said this from the very outset, is you need a different set or different group of investigators come in and take this thing and run with it. Not that those individuals that have been running with it at Saanich can't do the job, but maybe they had too much invested in it, or there's other things that are invested in it that they need to be separated from. I think this is very solvable. I really agree with you, Fitz, but it's not going to get solved. And I said this last week too, Jim and Fitz. I said that you'll never solve a case if the arena in which you're trying to solve the case is full of fear, and people are afraid to come forward. The only way to solve that case is you have to create an area of comfort where people feel comfortable speaking. And unless they create that arena, it's never going to happen.
And if there's a fear monger out there, one or more, they got to be taken down.
I agree.
Legally, within the criminal justice system, of course. So
I agree.
I think folks, again, out there at Saanich PD, we're open. We're not your enemies here. We support the blue, and but sometimes we got to call out the blue, and when maybe they're doing the best they can, but if we can offer help, or you think you can take some of our advice and get the RCMP to come in, Jim, we know there's some great profilers in Canada. We trained them back in the day, and if they're retired, they've trained great people in the various provinces there, and that's one way to start. This profilers don't always are the ones that come in and solve the cases themselves, but they can certainly help narrow suspect pools and give direction to various cases.
Yeah.
Ray, any question or two? Are you ready to?
I think we're good. I think the one question they had here was answered, but just Jimmy Clemente, so the area that we're talking about, the demographics, is very small. I mean, in the area where the homicide was committed and where they lived, I think there's about 9,000 people that are full-time residents. So that says something about it. I mean, everybody knows everybody.
Right. Which is why the threat is probably effective at that point.
Yeah. I agree.
I mean,
well, I'm going to take us out in a minute. I want to, of course, thanks my good friend from the first day at the FBI Academy. November 18th, Jim, 1987?
November 16th, as I recall. But
okay, well,
Jim, how's your back, by the way, Jimmy Clemente? I mean, you carried Fitz all those years. How's it feel?
Nah, we were side by side. We We had some great adventures in various places we've worked.
And as I've said before, the first time Jim ever professionally put handcuffs on someone, I was there with him.
Right. You and you and I arrested a fugitive that was about to be made into a top 10 fugitive, but we got him before he had that designation.
Which we
So
found out was a
he was a
mistake.
top 11 then. He was a top 11?
He was a top 11. There's
Okay,
no
there you go.
question.
But we were told we should have held off, right, Jim?
Yeah, but this is a child abductor,
Yeah.
and that's not something I'm going to do.
And that's why we didn't do it that way.
Although we were, let's say, yelled at by somebody above us, somebody else above us told us we did exactly the right thing.
Yes, which of course we did. And we
Yes.
always did throughout our careers, right? And I'm
Yeah.
sticking by that.
Well, you don't have to stick by it. It's just true.
Yeah. I'm going to do a shout out to someone real quick here. Talita Zardin, I helped her with her thesis. She's a forensic linguistic student in Brazil, and we have an audience growing in Brazil. She's at Unicinos University in Brazil. So Talita Zardin, thanks again for being a subscriber to Cold Red, and I'm glad to help you out with your forensic linguistics project, and good luck with growing that in Brazil. They need it in the Portuguese language too. Folks, other than that, I want to thank again my co-host Ray Carr, a longtime good friend, Jim Clemente, both longtime good friends, and they're both in my fourth book, A Journey to the Center of the Mind, on numerous pages, all positive guys, I swear, and cover drawn by Stephen, Jim's good friend
Stephen
who's
Jeter.
now passed, Stephen Jeter, and with help of an artist I know, Faith Scanlon. So I was very glad that we can get some of the artwork from Stephen posthumously, and then we converted that into the fourth book cover. So thanks for sharing that with me, Jim, and
Yeah,
I know you
sure.
appreciated that, and it made for a beautiful cover. Everyone, thanks again for listening to this combined episode of Cold Red and Best Case, Worst Case, and True Crime.
Real Crime Profile.
Real Crime Profile. It is true crime, but it's Real Crime Profiler.
Yes.
Profile with Jim Clemente. And everyone, like and subscribe to us. Check out coldredpodcast.com. Feel free to post any type of information you have. Thanks to our producers, Matt Robinson, Matt McLaughlin, music coordinator, Rick Schilling. And everybody, keep safe out there. Watch your surroundings. And we don't want anything bad happening to you. And everyone else out there, including you folks, see you next time on Cold Red.
Can I also say